Why should I run from my father's land? Did he not build this house for his children? I will live here, my wife will live here, and nothing will happen to me. Would you let your daughter marry into a house that remembers blood? In Oke-Odo, people said the Adekunle compound was rich with history but poor with joy. The mud walls were tall, the iron gate heavy, and the rooms stretched deep like a small village of their own. Yet, there was one whisper that never died. The compound rejects its sons. For 3 generations, every first son who brought a new wife into the family house never lived to see the next harvest. Some died in their sleep, some slumped at the dinner table, some fell sick without cure. The wives were left widows before their marriages even ripened. Elders called it jealousy of the land. Women called it a curse. But life went on. Now it was Tunde's turn. He was the latest first son, strong and stubborn, with a new bride named Sade. He had been warned many times to rent a house outside the compound, but he refused. Why should I run from my father's land? He told the elders, his chest high. Did he not build this house for his children? I will live here, my wife will live here, and nothing will happen to me. The family clapped for his boldness, but fear hid in their eyes. On the evening of their wedding, Sade was brought into the compound for the first time. The courtyard was alive with music. Women danced, children chased each other, palm wine flowed into gourds. The elders prayed over the couple, blessing them with kola nut and salt. But as the drums faded and the night grew still, something strange happened. When the guests left and the compound emptied, Sade entered her new room with her husband. She lay beside him on the soft mattress, her wrapper tied around her chest. The night air was cool, the lantern faint, the silence heavy. She closed her eyes to rest, but when she opened them again, she was outside. At first, she thought it was a dream. She was lying on the cold earth of the courtyard, the stars above her, the gate looming in the dark. Her heart raced. She hurried back to the room, slipped under the sheets, and clung to her husband, who was fast asleep. The second time, she stayed awake, watching the lantern. She forced her eyes open, blinking through the night. But as the cock crowed, she found herself outside again, shivering in the dew, ants crawling over her skin. By the third night, she screamed, "Tunde, wake up! Something is wrong with this house." He opened his eyes in shock, seeing her standing at the doorway with dust on her wrapper and mud on her feet. "What are you doing outside at this hour?" he demanded. "I don't know," she cried, tears in her eyes. "I sleep beside you, but I wake up in the courtyard. This house does not want me." Tunde frowned, anger flashing. "Don't talk like that. This is my father's compound. You are my wife. You belong here." But Sade shook her head, trembling. "No, husband. The compound is pushing me away." The next morning, whispers spread quickly. Neighbors at the stream, relatives passing through, even strangers at the market began to say, "Have you heard? The new bride cannot sleep inside. Every night, the compound throws her out." By the end of the week, no one spoke of Sade by name. They simply called her the bride who could not sleep inside. And deep within the compound, Behind the walls of mud and iron, something unseen laughed softly, waiting. The fourth night came. Sade wrapped her arms around her husband, determined not to close her eyes. The room smelled of kerosene from the old lantern. The walls hummed with silence, and the compound outside slept. Tunde held her close, whispering, "Nothing will happen. Sleep." But fear pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone. She stayed awake, listening to her husband's breathing until it slowed into steady snores. She must have drifted at some point, because when she opened her eyes, the night air cut her skin. She was lying once again in the courtyard, the sky black above her. Her heart thudded. She pushed herself up, shivering in the cold dew. This time, she did not rush back inside. She looked around, desperate to understand. The moon was bright enough to cast shadows across the compound walls. She glanced down at her own body and froze. There was none. Her feet touched the earth. Her arms trembled, but the ground showed nothing. No shadow followed her. Her throat dried. "God help me," she whispered. She hurried back into the room. Tunde was still sleeping. She curled beside him, tears burning her eyes. "Why me? Why this house?" In there, the fifth night, Tunde refused to sleep. He held her wrist, determined to prove her fears wrong. "You are not leaving my side," he said firmly. The lantern burned low. Hours dragged. The night was thick with silence. But sometime before dawn, Tunde blinked, heavy with sleep. His grip loosened. When he opened his eyes, Sade was beside him. Relief washed over him until he noticed something strange. The door was wide open. The cool air swept in, carrying the smell of wet earth. He sat up quickly. "Sade?" She stirred, groaning, and sat upright beside him. "I am here," she said weakly. But something pulled his eyes to the courtyard. His heart skipped. There, on the cold ground, lay a shadow perfectly shaped. It was Sade's, the same wrapper, the same posture, but it was flat, black, staring upward as though it had a life of its own. Tunde's mouth went dry. He whispered, "Your shadow, it is outside." Sade gasped and gripped his arm. "What are you saying?" "Look," he hissed. She followed his gaze. Her knees buckled. The shadow lay on the ground, not attached to her, but moving faintly, as though it breathed. "No," she whispered, trembling. "No, no, no." The shadow slowly turned its head, though no head existed. It twisted on the earth like smoke caught in still air. And then, though it had no mouth, a whisper crawled across the courtyard. "Go! Leave!" Sade screamed. Tunde pulled her into his chest, his heart racing. The door slammed shut by itself, and the lantern flickered violently. When dawn came, the courtyard was empty again. The shadow was gone. But Sade no longer wept. She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes hollow, her lips trembling. "It is not the house that rejects me," she whispered. "It is the house that wants me apart from myself." Tunde gripped her hand, his own body shaking. For the first time, he believed her. And deep within the compound walls, the silence was heavy, as though something was listening, waiting for the next night. Tunde could not sit still after that night. The image of Sade's shadow lying alone in the courtyard haunted him. He tried to bury the thought under chores, under laughter with cousins, under the sound of his wife pounding yam in the kitchen, but whenever he looked at her, he saw the emptiness in her eyes, the way she no longer trusted the walls around her. That evening, as the compound settled into silence, Tunde took a lantern and walked around the yard. He traced his steps along the mud walls, past the old mango tree, past the broken mortar that had been there since his grandfather's time. He stopped by the back wall, the one his father always warned him never to lean against. The mud was darker there, damp even when the season was dry. He lifted the lantern higher. Strange marks ran across it, not scratches, not cracks, but shallow lines like someone's nails had dragged through wet earth. He touched the wall. It was cold. The air shifted, and then he heard it. A low murmur, faint as breath. He dropped the lantern in shock, its flame quivering. The wall was whispering. Tunde pressed his ear close, his heart hammering. The voice was too faint to understand at first, but as the wind stilled, the words grew clearer. Not welcome, not welcome. He stumbled back, his chest tight, his foot struck the fallen lantern, and he nearly dropped it again. "Who is there?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "Show yourself!" But the compound gave no answer. Only the rustle of leaves in the mango tree replied. How? That night, Tunde told Sade nothing. She already carried enough fear. He held her tightly on their mat, whispering that all would be well, but sleep refused to come. Near dawn, he drifted, only to be woken by her scream. He jumped up, searching. The door was closed. But Sade was standing at the center of the room, her wrapper loose, her eyes wide. "Tunde," she whispered, pointing to the wall. "It called me." He followed her finger. The mud wall behind their bed was damp, a dark patch spreading across it. And faintly, in the dim light of the lantern, a single handprint pressed outward from inside the wall, fingers long and wet with clay. Tunde grabbed Sade and pulled her back, shielding her with his body. The handprint slowly faded into the wall, leaving only cold silence behind. They stood frozen until the cock crowed. That then?" By morning, Tunde's uncle arrived with firewood. He saw their pale faces and frowned. "You two are not sleeping well." Tunde hesitated, then asked, "Uncle, why do they say the compound rejects its sons?" The old man's eyes darkened. He dropped the firewood and sighed. "There are things you do not ask. This land has long memory." "Too long." "What memory?" Tunde pressed. The uncle shook his head. "When your grandfather built this house, he buried more than bricks in the ground. The walls remember. They hold grudges." He picked up his walking stick and left before Tunde could speak again. And Miss, that evening, as the sun dipped, Tunde watched Sade carry water from the clay pot into the kitchen. For a moment, she looked peaceful. But when her shadow fell across the wall, it twisted. Strangely bending in directions her body did not move. Tunde's skin prickled. The compound was not just rejecting her. It was trying to claim her. Tunde could no longer pretend. The handprint on the wall, the whispers in the night, Sade's shadow twisting. These were not tricks of tired eyes. Something lived inside the compound, something older than them. That morning, when Sade left to fetch firewood, Tunde sought out his mother. She was pounding yam in the back kitchen, her wrapper soaked with sweat. "Mama," he began, lowering his voice. "What did Baba bury when he built this compound?" Her pestle stopped mid-air. She turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "Who told you that?" "Uncle hinted," Tunde pressed. "He said the walls have long memory." "Mama, please, tell me the truth. My wife cannot sleep inside. Something is wrong." For a moment, her shoulders sagged. She wiped her forehead, looking older than her years. "Your grandfather was a proud man," she said at last. "He wanted this land to stay in our family forever. They say he went to a priest for protection. The priest told him, 'Lay a foundation with sacrifice, and no stranger will ever inherit the house.'" Tunde's chest tightened. "Sacrifice?" His mother's lips trembled. "A bride. On the night he roofed the first room, a young bride went missing. People whispered, but no one dared question him. Since then, no wife has ever lasted here." The pestle slipped from her hand, striking the mortar with a dull thud. "That is all I know," she whispered, her eyes wet. "And I beg you, my son, do not ask more. Some truths should stay buried." Anything, Tunde left, his head spinning. A bride buried in the foundation? His stomach churned. He wanted to believe it was only rumor, but every cold touch in the night, every whisper from the walls told him otherwise. That evening, he told Sade nothing. She was already fragile, her eyes ringed with sleeplessness. Instead, he sat outside with his lantern, staring at the cracked floor of the courtyard. If the ground remembered, then it could also reveal one path. Near midnight, when the compound was silent, he returned with a hoe. He chose the corner where the wall was always damp, the place where the handprint had pushed through. He struck the earth once, twice. The hoe sank deeper into wet clay. On the third strike, it hit something solid. His breath caught. He dropped to his knees and dug with his bare hands. The soil gave way, cold and sticky, until his fingers brushed against wood-rotted, splintered wood. A box. He scraped harder, pulling it free. The lid crumbled under his grip. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, lay a skull, tiny bones, bangles still clasped around fragile wrists, the bones of a woman. Tunde's stomach turned. The lantern flame flickered wildly, throwing long shadows across the wall. And then he heard it, a low, broken voice drifting from the skull itself. "Not welcome, not welcome." Tunde stumbled back, the hoe falling from his hand. The ground trembled faintly under him. From inside the house, Sade screamed. The scream tore through the compound. Tunde dropped the lantern and sprinted into the house. The room was dark, the air thick, and Sade was thrashing on the mat, her eyes wide but unfocused. Her hands clawed at her throat as though invisible ropes were tightening around her neck. "Tunde," she gasped, her voice strangled. "It's pulling me." He dropped beside her, grabbing her arms. "Stay with me. Nothing will take you." But as he held her, he saw it her shadow. It no longer lay at her feet. It had stretched across the wall, thin and black, pinned against the clay as if nailed there. And behind the shadow, another figure pressed close the outline of a woman, faceless, her bony hands gripping Sade's throat. The buried bride. "No," Tunde whispered, his blood cold. He remembered his mother's words. "A bride was taken the night your grandfather roofed this house." The shadow woman leaned closer to Sade, her mouth brushing the younger woman's ear. A voice like dry leaves filled the room. "He promised me a house, a husband, a life. Instead, he gave me earth. So now, no bride will ever stay. Every wife is mine." Sade's body jerked violently. Her lips turned blue. Tunde dropped to his knees, pounding the ground with his fists. "Take me instead," he cried. "Leave her!" But the shadow woman only laughed, her voice echoing through the walls. The sons built on blood, but it was the brides who were promised. "This house owes me wives." And as well, desperate, Tunde ran to the corner where he had dug up the skull. The box still lay open, bones gleaming in the lantern light. He lifted the fragile skull in both hands, his tears falling on it. "What do you want?" he shouted. "What will free us?" The skull pulsed warm in his palms. The voice whispered again, clearer this time. "Give me her breath." Tunde froze. He looked back at Sade, her chest barely rising, her eyes rolling back. The curse didn't want him. It wanted his wife. "No!" he roared, his body shaking. "You cannot have her!" The ground trembled. The damp wall cracked, a fissure running up its length. From it, soil spilled like blood. Sade's shadow was dragged tighter against the wall, the faceless woman merging into her body. Tunde made a choice. He seized the hoe, raised it high, and smashed the skull in his hands. A sharp cry ripped through the compound, louder than any human scream. The walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Sade collapsed limp on the mat, gasping, her shadow snapping back to her feet. For a moment, silence. Then, slowly, she opened her eyes. She was alive and easy place, but the compound was not finished. From the broken skull, black smoke rose and seeped into the walls. 100 faint whispers filled the air, not one voice but many, like a chorus of the buried. "We are still here. The ground remembers." Tunde pulled Sade into his arms, holding her trembling body. "We will leave this house," he vowed. "We will never step inside again." At dawn, they staggered to the gate. Behind them, the Adekunle compound stood tall, its walls cracked, its silence heavy. Neighbors who gathered stared in confusion, but no words could capture what had happened. And it. Years later, people still told the story. They said the Adekunle compound was cursed because of pride. Tunde's grandfather had buried a bride alive to bind the land to his bloodline. Her cries soaked into the walls, and from that day no bride could stay. The compound would always demand women, one after another, until the earth itself was satisfied. And though Tunde and Sade never returned, others whispered that sometimes, in the dead of night, a woman's shadow could still be seen walking the courtyard, searching, not for sons, not for men, but for brides. They thought the curse was on the sons, but the ground knew the truth. It was the brides who were promised. And to this day, the Adekunle compound still waits for its next one. I ask again, would you let your daughter marry into a house that remembers blood? Thank you for watching. This is Storytime by Noir. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe so more people tune into this channel.